What's up guys, Rote473 here, bringing you another YouTube video. This is the second of my Leaving Cert English guide videos. The one I put up yesterday, when I put it up in the morning, I put up the raw footage, the unedited version, so it looked shit. By the time you've seen this, the edited one will go up as well, but yeah, I was really rushing last night because I just wanted it up and I didn't pay attention and I put up the wrong file. So, you know, what can you do? It just shows me looking a little bit stupid, but I don't really mind too much. This is the Paper 2 guide, which is a lot different because Paper 2, if you haven't studied, you're kind of fucked unless you've, like, an insane degree of natural ability. Like, I'm not studying Paper 1 at all, but for Paper 2, I will do some beforehand. There's a couple of poets that I'd like to sit and read and kind of absorb their poetry. I don't need to sit and learn like a huge amount of quotes or anything crazy, because I'll get to that in a minute. But I do need to absorb, I think of it as like absorbing the poetry, so when I read it a few times, I will understand it, like fundamentally, and I'll be able to analyze it myself. I won't need to learn off answers, but I will need to read it several times. And that's just the poetry. So I have a few things you can try and do, but again, if you haven't studied at all, you are fucked for Paper 2. That's it, like, cram after your Paper 1, or don't even accept it, you're fucked. Just read stuff, read poetry, read Lear, fucking phone, read poetry, read Lear, do whatever you can, because otherwise you're kind of screwed. But anyway, I'm not even going to edit this video. I'm going to leave all these moments in where I'm like looking at the paper and stuff. First trick that I like to do in an exam for Paper 2 is do the unseen poetry first. Now, people think the unseen poetry doesn't matter because it's only 10% of the exam, or 10% of Paper 1 even. So it's not a lot, it's only 20 marks, and people are like, I'll leave that at the end. If I get stuck for time, I can cast it off. And normally you would think, alright, yeah, that's a great idea, it's not worth many marks. But I fundamentally disagree, because I view it as a warm-up. So if I do the unseen poetry, like right now, I'm just gonna look at an unseen poem. This is 2015 Paper 2, or 2016 Paper 2. So I'm looking at this poem and yet the books, right? Now I sit and read that for a minute or two, and I'll be able to already pull some shit out of it and start being able to analyze it, because they ask you a very base level knowledge. Discuss the language used by the poet throughout this poem. Really straightforward stuff, and I use it to warm me up as like an appetizer for the much harder questions to come later on. I usually go straight into comparative after that, because comparative is by far the hardest thing in this paper. So I would not ignore the unseen poetry, because if you can get like 15 out of 20, which is really, really achievable in unseen poetry, you should be getting at least 18. But if you can get 15 out of 20 in that, and then that's basically 4% of your entire exam. But if you were on 36 before, because you left out unseen poetry, you've now passed. So just remember little things like that. Like, doing alright in unseen poetry can be the difference. They're easy marks to get, so don't waste them. The next piece of advice I have is stick to strict time limits. If you set aside 20 minutes for unseen poetry, stop at 20. Don't keep doing it, because you're probably not picking up any more marks. I said this in the video yesterday. I'm just repeating myself, but it's a lot more important for Paper 2 because there's a lot more in it. The exam is 3.5 hours. I'm pretty sure it could be 3 hours 20, but it's half an hour longer than Paper 1, and with good reason. I'm trying to see, like, in my mind, I think a mark a minute, but I don't know if that actually works. So, spend an hour on Lear, spend an hour and 10 minutes on the comparative, so we're up to 2 hours 10, and spend another hour 10. Yeah, you actually, for Paper 2, you can do a mark a minute and you'll be fine. If you spend an hour on King Lear, an hour and 10 minutes on the comparative, and 50 minutes on your seen poetry, and the 20 minutes on the unseen poem, if you adhere to that, you'll be finished exactly on time. That's the rules I would go for. Now, trying to fit comparative into an hour and 10 minutes is tough, so if you want to cut like 5 minutes or 10 minutes off Lear, and then a couple minutes off poetry and give them to comparative, that's okay too. Because comparative is the thing that dicks people around the most. It's the biggest, like, I'm going for H1, and comparative is the thing that's stopping me from guaranteeing it. Like, if comparative wasn't on the course, I would be relatively confident in my H1, but the fact comparative is there, it's gonna be tricky. So if you're going to study anything tomorrow, if you're with limited time, study the comparative over anything else. Read themes and metaphors, not quotes. Quotes are really overrated. Quotes are to show that you understand what it is that you're saying. So if you say, I don't know, in Gatsby, he's naive and it's too hopeful, and then you take the quote, you can't change the past. Of course you can, right? That quote shows that you know that, and because I know that quote, I'm going to use it. But if you don't know that quote, if you're terrible at learning quotes, just understand it. Say something like, Gatsby refers to being able to change the past. Reference it. If you can't quote it, if you don't know the exact quote, just remember that personality trait of him. If you can give examples of him being naive, it's not as good, but almost as good as quotes. You just need examples. They always say that and they make reference to the text. It's to show that you know what they want. That you haven't just shown up on the day and are winging it. That you've read it. If you read the book Gatsby, most people can't read like a small... It's not like a small book. You could read it in a night. But most people won't be able to do that. So, I don't know. I think just sort of read over themes and metaphors and ideas and symbolism. Like, I found this in a video the other day. I never noticed how gold in Gatsby is associated. Gold and yellow is associated with death. Like the eyes of T.J. Eckleberg, his glasses are yellow. The car that Gatsby crashes into, Myrtle's yellow. Things like that. Like, if you say that in your exam, that's worth marks. Say, oh, we see symbolism here, and then you can compare it to symbols from other stuff. So, I don't know. Quotes are overrated, and you can't compare quotes. In a comparative, you should always be thinking of how you can tie things to each other. You should always be looking for the threads between each text. So, I've said symbolism in Gatsby. So now that you have that example, you're going to go and you're going to look and you think, right, where can I find symbolism in Plough Stars? And then you just look for symbolism. But if you're there learning quotes and then the thing says symbolism, how are you going to quote symbolism? You can't do it. It's too... People just freak out and go quotes, 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 quotes. Be flexible. Understand the text. And I know that's easier said than done, and at this stage you're probably not going to be able to do that. That's why I said if paper 2 you're kind of fucked. But if you're watching this, if you're only in 5th year now and you're watching this, don't stress about quotes. I got 54 out of 60 in my Lear essay and I used 4 quotes. And I said to my teacher, would I have got higher if I used more quotes? And she said, not necessarily, because it was kind of just like, it was lacking that sort of quality to make it a 100% essay, but it's still a 90. So it was like, quotes, as long as you show you have a H1 understanding of the text, quotes are superfluous after that. So they're kind of a crutch. Now, if you're failing, learn quotes. That's all you have. But if you're on the H4 or H3, you should not have enough natural ability to bring yourself up without relying on them as a crutch. And my last point, actually I've already addressed this. Again, like with paper 2, this video is a lot shorter because there's a lot less advice I can give you. Understand things. Like, don't just rote learn. Because that's not what they look for in English. It's a misconception that, like, I have to learn off all of this information. Not necessarily true. I learn nothing in English. I don't like studying English. But I do, but I don't think of it as studying. Like, I think it was for my 5th year summer exam, I sat down and I just read the poetry of Robert Frost for an hour. Because I like Frost. And I'm hoping and praying he comes up on Thursday, but I don't think he will. But I don't really care. So I sat down and I read the poetry of Frost for about an hour or so, and then people asked me, did you study? And I was like, no. And I thought about it, and I was like, I did actually study, but I didn't think of it because I like his poetry. I just sat down, I read it, I absorbed it, and then I could use it. So I didn't sit there going like, oh, I only have 5 quotes for this poem and I need 6, because then I'm forgetting all these other things that I have. If you like poetry, if you like the poet that you're reading, you will actually notice. Every time I read a poem of Frost, I notice something new that I've never seen. And when you have those moments in an exam where you're thinking and you're trying to rack your brain and you're like, and you get it down, and that's marks. It feels amazing. So pick a poet you like. I'm not huge into exam predictions because I'm always wrong. So there's going to be a female poet on it. So if you've studied a female poet, learn it. We've studied 2, and I'm going to pick one of them because, like, Don't worry too much about exam prediction. That's not going to help you, really. Because if you're wrong, you're completely fucked. So just find one you like. Maybe two you like to be safe. And just read their poetry. Try and absorb it as best you can. Read the themes of King Lear. Read up on a villainous character and heroic character. And then try and pick an answer. Try and pick an answer that isn't character specific. I challenged myself in the mock because there was an answer that only referred to Edgar and Edmund, but I really like those characters, so I was able to do it. But if there was an answer that said just Cordelia, I would say no thank you, because I don't like Cordelia and I can't really write about her that well. So keep your options open unless you're confident that if you're watching this video, you're not confident at all that you can do that, so don't. Just play it safe. Don't do anything crazy. If the thing says something really obvious, like sadness is a huge theme in King Lear, don't argue opposite, because you won't be able to do it. You can pull it off, I'm sure, but it would take an insane level of knowledge to make a compelling answer that sadness is not a prevalent theme in King Lear. That's too one way. I wouldn't even have that as a question. They would say, like we did a question a while ago, that good triumphs over evil. And you can argue that both ways. But if you're unsure, stick with the question. Flow with the question, because the question is designed to lead you that way. If you're confident, you can argue both. If you're really, really good, you can argue both. But I've seen people try and argue both that are only about H5s, H6. They try and argue both, and it just comes across as they don't have any consistency in their points. So, I suppose, right, if I had to sum up this video in one phrase, if you're unsure, play it safe. Because if you're watching this video, you're probably not really, really, really strong at English. That's not what it's for. This is for people who are struggling to pass, or in maybe like 50s or so, and you want to try and bring up your grade by a few percentages. Play it safe. If you see a comparative question, like I'm going to go right now, hold on. Oh, see, I really should have learned literary genre, because that's more fun. But, so, understanding who holds power and who is powerless helps to reveal the cultural context in text. That's actually really, really nice. Because a lot of the texts deal with, like, different class divides. That's a really, really nice question, and it's really open. And then, central characters can be successful or unsuccessful in challenging aspects. Yeah, see, I don't really like the 30-40s, because they're harder to keep track of in your mind of what you're saying. Because it's so split, so it's really hard to tie them together. That's another thing. If you're unsure, if both questions are really nice, pick the 70. Only if the 70 is horrible will you go near the 30-40. That's my rule of thumb. And if you don't know what I'm saying when I say 70 and 30-40, you are really fucked, because the exam is Thursday. Yeah, so that's another rule. Just pick the 70 if it's an easier one. Cultural context is heavily tipped to come up. Cultural context and literary genre, because GVV is up for the 2019 exam. I would love for GVV to come up, but definitely make sure to study cultural context. And that's all the advice I really have for paper 2. Just don't get bogged down in quotes. Don't try and overload your brain with just singular phrases that you can only use one time. Try and look for themes and symbols that you can tweak depending on the answer, because you can find something that symbolizes sadness and love and this, and it's just less of a restriction on yourself. And after that, there's really nothing I can say. If it's paper 2, you probably should have prepped for this one. Paper 1 you can bullshit, paper 2 you can't. And yeah, I hope this helped some people. This message is brought to you by Senior Code 473, stamped, sealed and approved. I'll see you guys again next time.